So Ghana's parliament passed legislation on Wednesday that intensifies a crackdown on the rights of LGBTQ people, as well as those promoting gay or other gender identities in the West African country. Now, same-sex relations was already punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Well, the bill now also imposes a prison sentence of up to 5 years for the promotion, sponsorship or support of gay activities. For more on this, we will be joined by board chair for the Center for Democratic Development in Ghana, Professor Audrey Gadzekpo, and also Executive Director for Access Chapter 2, Steve Letsike, joining us now. Steve, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think there's so much to understand here. What stands out for me about this particular bill that we're seeing now in Ghana is that already there were anti-gay laws in Ghana, and you can talk to us about those and what they've looked like for the past 3 years. But the concern now around the wording that's been used, the sponsorship and promotion of the LGBTI community. I mean, what does the sponsorship of the LGBTI community even sound and look like?
Yeah. No, indeed. Good morning to the viewers of Newzroom and to yourself. Indeed, this is devastating news because, whatever that is happening in Ghana now is actually pulling a full turnaround to human rights gains. Ghana has been in the past been celebrated for its progress around equality that needed to be achieved there. But even in that, with regards to the anti-homosexuality law, indeed, it existed in the past, but it was a sodomy law that was criminalizing, men who have sex with men and who were found on the act and so forth. But now the new law bill that has been passed has improved language, and you can see actually the kind of way that people suggest, whether it's really about identity, whether it's really about, who is supporting LGBTI organizing. So even the mere right of association, the right to freedom, the right to dignity, and the right to even assemble is now taken away, which really means that the law, if it's signed by the president, it will actually erase LGBTI people in complete existence in Ghana, which takes away the fundamental rights just by virtue of being human.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify that statement that you just made, though, because it's one thing to say that the law in itself will erase the existence of LGBTI communities when, that's an argument that opens itself up for another bigger argument, right? And the bigger question is, once these bills are passed, and in any part of the world, really, it doesn't matter if we're just talking about Ghana, it does not mean that these communities disappear. It means, essentially, or it begs the question, where do they go?
Well, look, you are actually criminalizing people. We have to really take that into understanding. You are imprisoning people. And the fact that if you know that you are my neighbor and you know that I identify as queer, I identify as lesbian, you will report me. We know all of these things that happens, and this is not new because they are copycatting what Uganda has done. They've just amplified it, not as severe as Uganda. It's the same thing that has happened in Kenya as well. So what has been a problem? It means that people are going to flee Ghana.
I'm using my other Good morning. I'm using my other
Apologies
device.
for that. So we've just got an interception by the guest that's joining in, Steve. But you can continue. And essentially, you were making the points about how we're seeing a spread of this, and not just in Ghana, but Uganda. You mentioned Kenya as well. Okay, we're going to sort out the sound there. Steve, I don't know if you're able to hear me. We just had a little sound interception there, but we'll continue. You were making the point there around how we're seeing anti-gay laws being passed in various parts of the continent. And I think you were making a point how this is a walking back of human rights on the continent.
So indeed, I think the point that I'm making here is that the moment you start to criminalize and you continue to criminalize human beings and taking away their own fundamental rights, right to dignity and integrity, you actually trying to, diminish their existence. And by virtue of that, they lose citizenship. Now they need to seek citizenship in other countries. They need to get away from their families and the land that they own and they live in forever. So what I'm raising really as a fundamental issue here is that Ghana's law, if it's passed, it really will, ensure that people don't belong into their own homeland. And that's a takeaway that we should not be entertaining. And taking away rights by virtue of being human, it's a fundamental problem. And we actually want to promote fundamentalism or religious fundamentalism because that's what has been said by the overwhelming parliamentarians of Ghana, quoting the Bible and so forth. And that's a big problem on its own. There's nothing wrong with being religious, but there's something wrong when you are taking away the existence of others.
Yeah, I mean, just the wording of the bill itself. It's called the Human Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill. Well, let's bring in our other guest, Professor Audrey Gadzekpo, who's the board chair for the Center for Democratic Development. She's speaking to us now from Accra in Ghana. Prof, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, explain to us what we've been seeing in Accra over the past few days as we get closer and closer to seeing whether or not the president will be signing that this law come into, or this bill come into law. I know that civil society has spoken out, but you've also got traditional leaders, the Christian and Muslim communities, really backing this bill.
Well, because we live in a democracy, and it's very important that we continue to advocate for the tenets of that democracy as set out in our Constitution. So yes, you're right, we have parliamentarians passing a bill. We have traditional leaders and Christian leaders and Muslim leaders in support of the bill. And that bill criminalizes homosexuality in our country. And our argument is simply, if you live in a democracy, it's not a majority wants or approves of. It's what the Constitution says must be protected. And gender discrimination under our Constitution is not allowed. That's why we are opposing the bill. That's why we have opposed the bill.
Yeah, Prof, talk to me about this, because what I'm seeing, and we're running images of civil society taking to the streets in Accra, obviously protesting against the bill, and one hopes that is an encouraging sign for the LGBTQ community in Accra, that there is some pushback, that there is a loud voice to some extent to push back on this bill. Are you seeing enough of that from the rest of the continent? I mean, where certainly laws like this you're not going to see in South Africa. Should a country like South Africa be doing and saying more, Prof, in your view?
I didn't hear that part of it. And you're saying that, could you please repeat the sentence?
So essentially, do you feel that the bill is getting enough of a pushback? We've got images from civil society protesting in Accra. Is that sufficient? And what do you need to be hearing from South Africa's government in assistance, if at all?
I think there's you're asking if there isn't am I seeing pushback by civil society?
Yes.
I think that, yes, I think that there is some pushback. PDD civil society. We have put together a coalition of some human rights civil society organizations that are pushing back as well. And I think that, you know, even the LGBTQ community, they're very vulnerable, they're very, they have to work underground because already, even before the bill was passed yesterday, they were under attack. So they feel a little bit vulnerable, but even they are organizing a lot better than they were in the past so that they can push back and protect their rights.
And Steve, I'm going to bring you in here. Then what's the role that South Africa should be playing, if at all?
Look, South Africa has always been very clear that we want a better world, we want a better Africa. And it's an Africa and it's a world that respects human rights. And we think our own government has been speaking out internationally about injustices. And we think the situation in Ghana, the situation in Uganda, and the situation in Kenya should not be ignored. Our government must speak out As much as we respect sovereignty, but where rights are concerned and where lives are at stake, we cannot be silent and where injustices are taking place. So we encourage our government to speak out, and not about condemning, but actually facilitating a conversation of dealing with conflict, but also teaching or even empowering other countries on how to enable citizens in respecting human rights for them.
You know what we do sometimes is when we have these discussions, we have a very high-level discussion about policy and what's written down and what we legislate as a country in other parts of the continent. But what we don't talk about is how there are human experiences behind some of this legislation that we're talking about. And Prof, maybe give us some of those examples. Because whether you agree with the LGBTQ community, these are still people's children, people's fathers that are going through whatever it is that the government is essentially wanting to legislate, and now what Parliament in Ghana has passed. Give us some of the individual stories, Prof, that you have run into, where you've seen people jailed for simply being who they are.
Is the question to me?
Yes, Prof, it's for you. That's the question for you.
Yes, actually, of course, the bill has been passed just yesterday, but the president has not signed it into law. It's going to take 14 days for the president to decide either to sign it into law or to give reasons why he can't sign it into law. What we want to do as civil society is to point out to the president why the bill is untenable under our constitutional provisions. I mean, Parliament obviously we made representation to, but they ignored it. But it is a real danger because in the bill, people will be jailed for being identifying as LGBTQ. They'll be jailed for LGBTQ activities. They'll be jailed for association. People like us who are advocating for their rights, including even media who speak in support of LGBTQ, will be jailed. So that makes it very problematic. Yeah. And that's why we intend also to go to court, because it offends our constitution.
Yeah, Steve, I'm going to give you one last bite, and I'll give you about 10 seconds for it to Steve Letsike in South Africa. Civil society organizations, any steps that we'll be seeing taking place this side?
Look, we have already started reaching out to the international relations, and we will stand in solidarity with Ghanaian LGBTI community and civil society. And I think we are calling on international stakeholders to put pressure on Ghanaian president not to sign the bill. And those are the steps we are envisioning with our partners everywhere.
All right, so we'll be following up on that very closely as well. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Speaking to us in South Africa, Steve Letsike, who's Executive Director for Access Chapter 2. Speaking to us from Accra, Ghana, Professor Audrey Gadzekpo, who's Board Chair for the Center for Democratic Development.